Good morning, class. Thank you for visiting my post for this week. This week's discussion board question asks, how do we understand traditions in the Arab Spring? Is it chaos or or an organized plan that leads to these transitions in the Arab Spring? So I would have to say the transitions are chaos by protesters. Let's look at two countries, Tunisia and Egypt. In this week's reading, we learned President Ben Ali was driven out of the country of Tunisia by the pressure of protesters because of issues like unemployment, inflation, and a high cost of living. Ali seeked exiled in Saudi Arabia, and he had been president of the country for 23 years. Therefore, the people of Tunisia probably felt as if they needed to take matters in their own hands to seek the type of government they want. It was obvious that Ben Ali had not been willing to give them the government that they want because he had been in control for so long, and during his period of his presidency, he never gave them what they want. So since they must have waited out for so many years, they never received the type of outcomes that they wanted. So therefore, they began these protests, and Ben Ali went into exile, and they ended up trying to work for what they wanted on their own. Therefore, Ben Ali was not willing for transitions and change in Tunisia because it was obvious he had not implemented change. So the protesters had to intervene on their own. The same issues take place in Egypt. President Mubarak recently resigned in Egypt in 2011 after he had been in control of Egypt since 1981. This resignation came because of the citizens. The citizens became tired of a corrupt president and government. Some policies under Mubarak was the emergency law rule, which made it that police could imprison any person without proper trial. There was also this gap between the rich and the poor was so divided. There's usually a middle class somewhere in between the rich and poor. However, in Egypt, under Mubarak, the middle class had solely sunk into the poor class because citizens were not receiving adequate pay. More specifically, government employees were receiving very low wages. So therefore, in 2011, protesters filled Tahrir Square in Egypt, more specifically in Cairo, to protest their unhappiness with Mubarak and his policies. These protests lasted for several days, and the number even risen well to over 100,000 protesters. So many in Egypt felt strongly against Mubarak, and they took the streets to demonstrate their unhappiness in large numbers. So, therefore, transition in many Arab countries like Tunisia and Egypt would not take place unless protesters took matters into their own hands. This is simply because the protesters are unhappy with their leaders, and leaders are not always willing to implement change, and some leaders and presidents may not be willing to implement change because of a fear of losing their power. They fear that since they have not given the citizens that they want to keep in power. However, the citizens are completely against them, which may be why they are unwilling to make those changes. So, all in all, traditions in the Arab Spring are changed because of chaos. It's obvious that they're not organized because the leaders have not made a clear plan of how they want the changes to take place. The leaders aren't even the ones implementing the change. The change is chaotic because it is coming from protesters who are trying to seek the change in demonstrations and sometimes violence across the cities. in those Arab countries. So thanks for visiting my post this week, and I look forward to your feedback.